Well, good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully, everybody can hear me. And welcome to the IRWD. The new year starts now. Garden Prep Workshop, Fall into Gardening. Today, we'll be discussing quite a number of things that relates to the fall and beginning our journey into our landscaping venture as far as getting ready for the fall, winter, and upcoming spring. A little bit of webinar housekeeping. Please keep your microphones muted. Any questions you might have, please submit them via the chat to the host. We're going to be collecting all the questions and then I'll be responding to them. And in a later time, I'm going to be emailing everybody, all attendees, the slide presentation along with all the some answers as well. We're going to have a time at the end for a bit of Q&A, but we have a pretty large attendance today, so we'll try to do that as much as possible and get you out in a timely fashion. So please be patient with us, and hopefully, once again, we should be able to answer all your questions you might have. Well, one thing about this class is, here's the agenda for today. Fall into winter gardening is the best time to care for our landscapes. We just got out of our summertime. Fall's about to be here, and with that comes a lot of time to really care for our landscapes. They went through this big heat. A lot of material out there might be fried sometimes, or just things have gone array in our landscapes. But it's really time to really tend to our landscapes and see what needs to be done so we can have a nice, healthy landscape. So some of the topics we're going to be discussing today, of course, is watering to the season, landscape cultural practices, or just simply landscape care. We're going to be discussing pruning. Pruning is it's important, but it's something to really consider on how much to do. A little bit about climate appropriate plants and inspecting your sprinkler systems. This is going to be a great time. It's never a bad time actually to inspect our sprinkler systems, but since hopefully we're going to start reducing our watering, it's really time to really take a look at our sprinklers and manage what we have and make any repairs. So let's get going here. So the ultimate goal with any of these gardening workshops is to hopefully create a beautiful garden, or to encourage you to look at your home landscape and areas, and hopefully consider making some changes that'll not only beautify your environment but also reduce your water use for the site. So things you always got to consider when it comes to our landscaping is lawns. Lawns is our highest water use plant material we have out in the landscape. So lawns provide a function, a purpose. If they're just sitting out there consuming water, something to think about. You know, maybe try to reducing it, because it does require quite a bit of maintenance. But just overall, the consumption of water. Convert some of the areas and utilize more climate appropriate plants, whether they be California native or non-native exotic species that are acclimated to our environment and to our climate here in California. More decorative, permeable hardscapes is a great thing to consider. Does require maintenance, but they can add other aesthetic features to our aesthetically pleasing features into our landscapes. Stormwater capture, you always got to think about that. Where's that water going when it rains or when you irrigate? We want to try to keep that water on site. And easy to maintain. Well, that's always one of those things you have to consider. Any landscape is going to require maintenance. How much maintenance depends on the plant material we have out there, and flowering cycles and so forth. So it's always things to keep in mind that it is going to require a little bit of a work from us, but hopefully you'll find some pleasure in going outside and doing some work in your landscape. So before we get started, I always have these slides where we talk about water use in landscapes. Once again, grass does provide a purpose, but it is, the highest water consuming plant that we have out in our landscapes. So here we have just some great information. So for every 1,000 square feet of grass, 25 to 35,000 gallons per year is what needed to keep that grass looking healthy. Right around 4,000 plus or minus gallons per month during summer times. Once that summer hits, we're just putting out tons and tons of water just to keep that grass healthy. So consider, is that grass providing a purpose? Is it being useful? If not, then why not change it out to something that's more pleasing, more beautiful? Add some color into your environment. By incorporating what we call climate appropriate plants, climate appropriate landscapes do save water. So by converting areas or utilizing these types of plants, the water savings is right there, as you can see, about 30 to 50% water savings overall per year, 15 to 20,000 gallons for that same exact 1,000 square feet. So now we reduced right around to 2,500 gallons plus or minus per month, and this is once again during peak use time. If you start using even lower water use plants, your water savings can even increase even more, 60 to 80% water savings by utilizing low water use plants. Now, all these things about plants, we're really going to get into it as far as high water use, medium water use, low water use, what it actually means. 1,500 gallons per month, right around summertime for low water use in plants. Now, here's the big one. If you consider using California native plants, not only are we building up habitat and utilizing plant material that's actually native to our environment. The water savings are there, just the way these plants are adapted. 80% plus water savings, fully or partially summer dormant. That's the great thing about our native plants is it's a different you can say it's a different beast when it comes to water use. We're going to take a look a little bit closer into that into water requirement for natives, but you'll be surprised. Of course, our last bullet point there, I mean, who doesn't like to see that? Requiring little to no supplemental water once they are established. And when I talk about native plants, we're not talking about sticks and cactuses out there. Even though we do have some cacti that are native to us, I mean, we're talking about you can have a beautiful evergreen landscape or plants that go deciduous and flowering cycles just as normal landscapes have, but with utilizing California native plants. Oh yeah, here's the big one, seasonal water needs. So, this is a fall into winter gardening workshop. We talk about prepping for this seasonal change. We're going through the changes right now. As you can see, the days are getting shorter. Plants do know this. They start to utilize less water, start to shut themselves down. So it's a really important time to look at our water use and start making a change during the season. So seasonal watering schedules, three main questions when you're watering your landscape. How long should I water for? How often should I water? What time do I start watering? Uh, it that's all that's all going to be pushed by the type of plants you have, the time of year it is, and soils also dictate, how are you going to be watering as far as and often. When it comes to what time, the best time to always irrigate, if you need to irrigate, is early morning. Early morning, you get that water in your landscape, and well, basically you get that water in our nice, beautiful soil sponge. Once the sun comes up, the plants start to utilize that water, and it goes on through its day. Watering in the afternoon sometimes can be bad for your landscapes as far as the plants are starting to shut themselves down as far as being active, just like we start to get tired and go to sleep, so the plants start to do the same. And sometimes having that sitting water out there in the landscape in the afternoons, it's a perfect time for fungus, bacteria, just other pests to attack your plants. So uh, be careful on that. So best time to always irrigate is early morning. Get that water ready for your plants to use during the day. Benefits of proper watering. Landscapes do look better when we water properly. We can stay within our budgets, of course. We can conserve water. We're being more efficient in their use of water. Our plants are going to be healthy, and we're going to actually have a healthy soil too. Last thing we want to do is have saturated soils where there's no oxygen getting in, and they start to, have that smell that we don't want to see smell out there in the landscape. You want to make sure you have a nice, beautiful, healthy soil. That's what we're going to talk about a little bit later as well. So what's driving our water use? Here's our watering factors. We know that weather drives our water use. Our climate, our overall climate around our homes and properties and our environment. So as it gets hotter, it's driving the use of water for some of these plants, but not all of them. That's one thing that we're gonna really talk about later. Plants. So plants are basically classified into these little unique classifications as far as high water use, moderate water use, low water use, very low water use, and these classifications are basically percentages of how much water these plants need for them to look beautiful and healthy and throughout the year. And so, we assign these classifications to these plants. So when we create these schedules or watering schedules or tell you when to water, it's all based on all this information. So when plants lose water, you know, there's a measurement of units that we use for that, which is inches of water. Plants lose water in inches. Irrigation systems themselves, with irrigation, all we're trying to mimic is rainfall with the sprinkler system. And these sprinkler systems put out water also at a certain rate, and it's also measured by inches. So if we know how many inches something is losing, we can put those inches back, and that's all we're doing when we're providing schedules for landscapes. And soils, we want that water to go deep into the soil. We want those roots to stretch out. The bigger and longer and 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 vast root system that we have out there, plants will love this and actually do a lot better. When we have short roots, shallow root systems, it gets hot, and it's more difficult to water them because those areas tend to dry out a lot quicker. So here's a big one, you guys. So September, right now, really, it is time to really reduce our watering by 30%. Yes, it's still warm, but the days are getting shorter. Plant material does start to require less and less water, and we know this by just scientific methods that we measure plant water loss in plants, which we're going to take a look at right now. It's just overall, we can see this right now going on with our weather stations as far as the use of water of the plants using water itself. So really look at your watering schedules right now, and start to vamp down 30%. It's not a lot, but it's gonna go a long way once you start saving that water. Weather, plants, and water relationships. So earlier I spoke about these plant classifications. Now here you have high water use plants up here. You can see this grass is considered high water use. There's moderate water use. This is good old Raphaelepis. Here's some ceanothus and some sages. So all these different classifications and plants, and what does that mean as far as their water use? So here's this nice little table where we have these different classifications. Earlier I mentioned that it's basically just a percentage of ETO. Now this is something that we're going to discuss on the next slide. What does ETO stand for? Evapotranspiration. Pretty big word, but something's very simple to understand. So when plants lose water, we have to measure it, and we measure by this factor called ETO, which is just simply measurement of water that is lost, through the soil and the plants. When the water goes through the plant and out the leaves, we call that transpiration. And then, of course, as it evaporates from the soil and on top of the plants, that is simply evaporation. So both those words, we come up with this fancy word, evapotranspiration, which is this nice little symbol here, ETO. So we can actually measure this. And so, like I said earlier, plants lose water, and the measurement that it loses water is in inches. So we can measure how many inches of water a plant has lost, and we could just put that water right back when we water when using our sprinkler systems. So when we talk about adding that water back, we measure rainfall in inches. Irrigation, we also measure that in inches. We put a rate on it. But for sprinkler systems, we say inches per hour because it has to have some time on there, because that's how we start putting out all these irrigation schedules based on the amount of water we're putting back per hour. So here is one of our weather stations here at IRWD. This is one of our weather stations that's sitting right on top of cool season grass, because it's the highest water use plant material that we have. So that is our basically our 100% marker. That's what we use for measuring water loss, the highest water use plants. So it's sitting out there every single day, collecting data every single minute, every single second. And we utilize that to create our budgets. We also utilize that to create watering schedules. So this station is measuring water loss, or ETO, in inches. It sits on that cool season grass. It's taking all these factors into consideration, and it's putting out, and it basically gives us a number of how much water it's lost. And that number is in inches. Here's some of the data. So I put it on a nice graph for you. So here's our weather station data. So as you can see here in January, that grass loses around 2.35 inches of water. But here in July, which is our peak watering time, that grass has lost a little over 6 inches of water. So when we look at this and we use this as our marker for providing water for plants or creating these schedules, we start taking a percentage of each of these months to put that water back into our landscape. And depending on the plant material, you're going to see how much water is required, or how much water these plants need for them to look healthy in the landscape. So here we have nice little cups, as you can call them, or nice little columns. But here's the water loss for grass. Once again, this is our 100% marker, 6.36 inches of water. And this is July. So this is water need for the month of July. So when we talk about high water use plants, such as your cool season grass, we don't want it, we never give it back 100%. We give it back 80%, or that plant factor, KC value of 0.8. So that's how much water we're going to give back that cool season grass. Now, our budgets are based off of what we call warm season grass, St. Augustine's, Bermuda's grasses, and so forth. So that water budget for grass is 65%, or 0.65. So that's how much water is needed for a warm season grass to look healthy. Now, when it comes to medium water use plants or moderate water use plants, they require around 50% of what a cool season grass requires. I mean, you can see that water savings is there. So by having, climate appropriate plants, moderate water use plants, you know, about a little over 3 inches of water. And then here we start going to low water use plants, about 30%, and then even very low water use plants. We start talking about natives. You can see just how much water these plants require in the month of July. So would you rather be watering a lot of high water use plants such as this, or would you rather be watering more moderate, low water use plants, or even moderate as far as like a warm season grass and some shrubbery out there? Now, I can guarantee you that most of your plants that you have out there that is not grass fall right into this category of moderate water use plants. Most of the plants that I see out there in all of our landscapes are very commonly used landscape plants that are what we call medium water use plant material. Now, when it comes to sprinkler systems, here's just a quick little scheduling thing. So if I know how much water a sprinkler is putting out, for instance, let's say I have spray heads and they're putting out 2 inches of water every hour, and I need to water this moderate water use grass. Let's just round this down to an even number. It requires 4 inches of water, and my sprinklers are putting out 2 inches every hour. That means I need to water this for a total of 2 hours in the month of July. So now convert that into minutes. That turns into 120 minutes, and then you start to divide that up into your different days of watering. And that's very simple, crude scheduling, but that's basically how we start to develop irrigation schedules. But there's a lot of other factors such as climate, microclimates, density. I mean, we can go on and on and on, which I would love to, but we'll be here for hours. So very, very simple scheduling. Well, I hope that wasn't too much when it comes to watering our landscapes. I just really wanted to make a point that, we are going into the fall. Our landscapes are, starting to utilize less and less water. So we should be aware of what's going out there. And really, what's driving that water use out there. If you have a sprinkler system, is the way we program those controllers. So we do have recommended irrigation schedules on our website, which I'm going to show you a little bit later. They're great for reference, and they were created in a way where you can tweak them somewhat, where you can maybe decrease or increase those run times by a minute or two, and you should be okay. That's one thing when we're looking at creating schedules for plant material, is really consider what customers in our service area really need, or what our budgets are as far as water use. Now, now we're on to the next part, right? So we talked about water need and plants and evapotranspiration, all that fun stuff, right? But it's really about watering to that bell curve, watering to the season. Here's our beautiful seasons, and we know that, when do I start watering? Do I wait until summer to start watering? What about spring? Do we have a dryer this year? I found myself back in 2014, 15, I was watering during the wintertime because of the drought. So there's always those things to really consider is, how is our season doing as far as water use goes? Do I have to provide that supplemental water? What about spring showers? Are we going to have a rainy season? Will that give my landscape water? And then can I store some of that water also to use in the landscape? Can I contour the shape of my landscape so it can trap some of that water within the soil and be available to my plants? So those are always just things to consider. When we start getting into summer, yes, we were reaching that peak. If you saw that bell, or that the water loss for grass, and we rely on that to create our schedules, yes, we are, you know, picking up that watering in summer, and then we start to tailor off as we start getting into the fall. So once again, it's really important to really start considering to reduce our watering. And in the sprinklers, turn off your sprinklers in the winter. Can we do that? At the very most, watering once a week in the winter is feasible. If you water more than that, then there's potential that you might be utilizing too much water. So just be careful of that. Now, once again, here's a different animal. California native plants. They do require water a lot different than our exotic species plants from all around the world that are do well in our landscape, of course. But these plants, our beautiful natives, are acclimated to our weather pattern. So for many of our California native plants, the water need is opposite. They awaken from their summer slumber in the fall. During the summertime, they require very little water, if any water at all. It just really depends. Water need for them really starts to begin in the late fall through spring. Um, Deep, infrequent watering. That's always a good uh, point to make, and that's for any landscape. Whether it be natives, non-natives. Deep and frequent watering is always the best. When you get that water deep into the ground, allowing those roots to stretch out, those plants will tolerate heat spells and a little bit more stress than compared to plants with shallower roots. So keep that in mind when you're out there watering. It's important to do what's considered what we consider cycle and soaking. Short run times, multiple start times to allow the water to sit, penetrate the soil, go deeper, and then you get the next cycles going, and then pushing that water further and further into the soil. Okay, right. So we're back at this graph again. So let me put up there's our ETO, right, of water loss for grass. There's our rain curve, and that's when we do have a rainy season. So let's cross our fingers for this year. But when we do have rain, that's our rain pattern. This is the need for cool season grass. So this is how much water cool season grass needs throughout the year. And once again, you can see here, right? We just left August, now we're in September. Pretty big dip as far as water use goes. And you can see look at this big trend down as far as water use goes. And if you're not out there adjusting your schedules or your timer, your sprinkler timer, that line stays up here, right? And so while we're watering up here, this is going down here, and our budgets are starting to reduce. So this, if we don't control our watering schedules, and our controllers and make adjustments, we have a potential to go over budget. Now here's water requirement once again for warm season grass. There's water requirement for climate appropriate plants. We're talking about exotics. Now you can see this bell curve, right? So as it starts to warm up, we start to use more water. We hit at summer peak time, and then we start to reduce. Now here's the best thing about our beautiful California native plants. They follow our local rain pattern. So when do they require water? Right around these months and these months. This is when the rainy season kicks in. But look at this. Look at this down bell, this opposite curve during the summer months. I know that, I love almost every single type of plant that is out there. If you come and visit my house, you're going to see every single plant you could possibly imagine. But I have these plants grouped into different water needs, exposures, and so forth. So I know that this past summer, my natives, I watered them. I gave them a good watering once a month. Once in June, I gave them a really deep soaking. Once in July, I gave them another nice deep soaking. And once in August. This month, it's starting to cool down. I'm going to go out there and give it another good deep soaking, but that's about it. From time to time, I'll go out there and just spray them down as far as try to um, clean any kind of dust or anything they might have on there. But just simple watering. So if you're interested, later on, I believe in a couple of months, well, next month we're going to be having the My Garden, My Watershed workshop. Where we're going to get into plant material a little bit more. And then we're going to have the Time to Plant workshop in November, where we're really going to get into plant material. And I have some great plant palettes that I created. So hopefully we can take a look at those. So this is a very important thing to practice when we're out there in our landscapes, especially when we're watering. Hydrozoning, big word, but simply just grouping plants together with similar water needs. Once again, sun exposure, soil requirements, growth rates. It's really important to also allow your plants to grow in, if possible, naturally. We're going to get into pruning, and pruning, yes, pruning is done for the health of our plants, but you always got to be careful when it comes to pruning. We'll talk about why. So hydrozoning, very key topic and to consider. All right, let's get into landscape cultural practices. Basically, landscape care. It's going to be that time to go out there and weed now. Most of us, some of us, might have gardeners and landscapers that take care of our landscapes. I myself have a landscaper that comes by and does simple maintenance, but I myself love to get out landscape. So my gardener, he's a really nice guy, and he knows what to do as far as the simple little things that need to be done. But when it comes to pruning or major cleaning up of areas, that's stuff that I like to do myself, because I could take my time and actually, I take responsibility for what's out there for myself, because sometimes, these guys, they're out there doing hard work, and their objective is really just to go out there, clean, get out of there as quick as possible sometimes. And sometimes you have to kind of let them know on what to do and what not to do as far as your landscapes, if possible. Take a little time to care for your own landscapes. It'll really help you out and show you, how much really goes into caring for plants. Building our soils. I'm going to get into this just a tad bit, but throughout the year, we like to have some workshops on composting and soil. So please look for that. Look for those workshops coming up in the near future. Now, when it comes to building up our soils, typically, one thing I always hear from our customers or from anybody in general is when we talk about soils is, what kind of soil do you have? We have clay. We have clay, 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 clay. It's quite a bit out there. Clay is great actually because I can work with clay. I can make it better. That's one thing about clay soil. It's not a bad thing. So too much clay, too sandy, too stony, too acidic. It's always one of those things. Do we want to start amending our soil? How deep do we want to amend? What are we going to do out in our landscapes? Do we want to have a nice structure of soil? We want to have a nice healthy soil. You know, soil. One thing about soil, there's a lot of great things in soil that when we start using let's say pesticides or chemicals, synthetic chemicals out there, we start to kill off a lot of these beautiful organisms and insects that are actually that are benefit to our soils. They all work hand in hand, not only to break down material, but to also provide the plants nutrients. Sometimes as you can see here, what a great book there, Michael Reiser for Symbiosis. Fungi that actually creates this relationship soil with the roots of the plants and help with these interchanging of nutrients. I mean, just really great. When you see a soil with that's alive, with nice amounts of water, nice amounts of organic material and nutrients and worms. I love seeing worms. You see worms in the soil, it's like that's a big plus. Thumbs up to everybody. Um, so it's important to care for our soils as best as possible. There's beneficial bacteria, there's beneficial fungi out there. I mean, there's a lot of things in the soils that'll help not only keep the plants healthy, but also break down, provide nutrients to plants. I mean, just really consider what we have out there and build them up. Keep that organic material out there. Keep those, keep up your good watering practices. Try not to disturb too much of the soil, right? I love these pictures, but sometimes you look at these, you go, okay, is that really in our soils? Yes, and they're beneficial. Soil predators prey upon the bacteria, the fungi. I mean, just all these things are just working to make our plants healthier, build up a good soil. Just overall, um, soil life is very, very important. So take care of our soils, um, practice good watering practices, and that soil will start to build up. And once again, take care of your plants. They do help by having a good soil. Now, what is the best, oh, I love this slide right here. Encourage soil life. Now, let plant litter or debris lay where it falls. Now, one thing is that, if you don't like seeing a bunch of leaves and everything out there, one thing is I sweep into my planter beds. I don't, sweep away. I try to get that material back into the shrub areas or to the planter areas. And if it doesn't look, if you don't like having big bulky stuff like that, one thing that you can always get, they make what's called a mulching blower, where you can actually use it like a little vacuum, and it sucks up that leaf debris and it actually grinds it up, puts in a bag, and you can use that to put right back into your planter areas, or you can use that to put into your compost bins, which is really great. So um, once again, water appropriately, water effectively. Try not to till or disturb your soil too much. Soil conditioners. Now, what is the best soil amendment for sandy soils, for clay soils, right? You better believe it. Good old compost. When it's broken down completely, you want some beautiful compost out there. It makes not only a great amendment, just a great conditioner overall. Now, composting. Here we go. So, like I said, I'm just going to touch lightly upon compost. Now, composting, best supplement you can keep your garden soil. You're adding this nutrient-rich humus, which fuels plant growth, restores vitality to depleted soils. It's also free, easy to make if you can. If you do have to buy compost, you just make sure you know how it's made. Try to get as much information on how it is made. So be on the lookout for some workshops on composting, which hopefully should be coming up shortly either this fall or winter. Mulch, 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 mulch. Now, I can't stress enough how important mulch is. Now, when it comes to mulch, some of the most important things to consider is, try not to purchase mulches that have color, that are stained or anything, just because once again, that is, it could be toxic material, dyes, and so forth. So I try to, once again, buy mulch from reputable sources. So, one thing there's a blend that I love that's called Forest Floor. It's really commonly found in various suppliers. Is one thing is try to find landscape yards where they sell material in bulk, such as stone, soils, rock. They also have big supplies of mulch that can be purchased. And once again, ask a little questions on how the mulch is processed or made. Make sure it doesn't have any toxic material in. But mulch is so important. You know, all plants and soil will benefit from this. Retain the moisture. One thing is, it helps reduce soil temperature, which is great. So not only will it be retain that moisture in that root zone profile, but also reduce the temperature of that soil, which will help reduce evaporation and water loss. So, um, I see a lot of bare or exposed soils areas out there that the sun comes, heats them up. You get that nice cake layer on top, which is then hard for the water to permeate. So, one thing is, try to keep some nice cover out there. Helps control weeds, beneficial insects, and earthworms will thrive, and it will break down over time and become part of your soil. Now, here's a little trick that I learned a long time ago. As far as when we're out there weeding, you know, try to get weeds out of there as quick as possible. They can be vector points for pests, and they can pass disease along. So one thing is clean up the area and use good old newspaper. I love using newspaper as a weed barrier. Why? I try to stay away from weed cloths and fabrics and stuff like that. Just good old black and white newsprint. Lay some layers out there, as you can see here, and then get that mulch right on top. That's it. Now you have a great weed barrier that's going to allow water through it. It'll break down over time and become part of your landscape, which is great. One thing I forgot to mention is, typically when I'm out there and I'm weeding areas like this, is I have a great little garden claw that I'll go in there and just kind of move soil around a little bit, just on the top, just to kind of work that soil a little bit. Not too deep, but just enough to just work it up a little bit. There we go. Okay, wow. We are at pruning for plant health. Now, when it comes to pruning, you're going to see some slides here now. All these, once again, these slides are going to be emailed, all these slides, and this presentation will also be posted on our website soon. So you can go back and reference this. So, one thing about pruning is ask yourself why. Why are you going to prune? I love this picture here because, she's in there pruning this, it's a beautiful Japanese maple. But, pruning is kind of an art sometimes. It's a way for us to shape a plant when they're young, you know. But, think about what you're going to do out there as far as pruning. Are there branches that are dead or rubbing against each other, deadheading? You know, do you have a plant that wants to stand as a focal point? Do you want to expose maybe some of that branching, that trunk? Is it getting too leggy? If you're doing it to control size, then maybe it wasn't the right plant for that area. So, when it comes to plant selection, it's important to look at how tall, how wide is that plant going to get? Is it too big for this area? Can I prune it somewhat to make it stay within this area? But or if you're going to be hedging it, that's a whole another thing. Or does the plant have disease? Are you going to prune it for disease control? So when is it ideal to prune? There's then the good thing is there's so many resources online. Also we have the master gardeners available where you can email them questions and they'll be able to get back to you. But simple. These tips I'm about to give you are simple. We call textbook tips when it comes to pruning. It is somewhat of an art and science a little bit to it. So when should I prune? How much should I prune? If I prune too much, what is that going to do to my plants? Pruning too much will make that plant spread out new growth. Sometimes you might get weak growth as well, sucker growth, weak limbs, and so forth. When you shear, I mean, wow, I see a lot of shearing out there. It does provide a purpose when it comes to hedging and so forth, but there are proper ways of doing that as well. Is it necessary to prune your trees? How often should you prune your trees? One thing about tree pruning is, I would just say it's really about safety. You don't want to remove too much. It's more about just keeping that plant healthy. What about pruning California native plants? I love the California Landscape, California Native Plant Society has some great information on pruning on on their website. There's also great websites, nursery websites that that grow California native plants that give you some great tips on pruning natives. But so there is a slight difference, but it's just pruning at different times of year for natives. Once again, it's always on those dormancy periods and times of year when they're less active. Now here's an important, very important slide when it comes to any kind of pruning is clean tools, healthy landscape. I can't stress that enough. Once again, it's just, keep your tools clean, keep them sharp, keep them free of debris, oil them up. Um, you know, if you're gonna oil them, you can use regular oils or you can use linen oil if you want to be eco-friendly. So um, just important to really keep them sharp, keep them clean. Consider a one thing when I go out there and prune is, consider a dip solution. Now, a dip solution is basically a nice little bucket with, you can use bleach and water, 1 part bleach, 9 parts water, and use that for dipping your tools in there before doing major cuts or just out there pruning so you don't transfer any kind of infection or pathogens along the way. You can also use rubbing alcohol. Rubbing alcohol is great to clean your tools as a disinfectant. So there's a lot of different methods, but just once again, it might sound tedious out there, but it's a good way to once again keep your landscape healthy and keep it from transferring any kind of disease that might be out there. Sanitize your tools before and after gardening, and of course, clean, dry, sharpen, and oil your tools after use and before storing them away, and store them in a dry area. I forgot that one bullet point. If you see rust, good old vinegar will help you get that away. Use some baking soda as well. But remember, rust is a fungus. So winter pruning. Once again, like I said, this is a lot of textbook things that we can find online. Pruning during dormancy, most common practice, promotes vigorous growth. Um, Pruning, flowering plants to when you're pruning plants to enhance flowering. You know, for plants that bloom in the spring, prune when their flowers fade. So that's after they're done blooming. Maybe it's a good time to just get those dead flowers off of there. Trees and shrubs that flower in mid to late summer should be pruned in winter or early spring. Pruning should not ever substitute good plant selection. Pruning begins at planting time. Pruning does encourage new growth. You want to, it's really about maintaining plant, encouraging flowering or fruit development, a special form. Like I said earlier, if you want to expose the branching, if you want to have it a certain shape, it is a little bit of an art to it. The big thing about pruning is follow the 3Ds. Remove dead, damage, and disease is always key when it comes to pruning. That's really why you want to prune. Uh, Remove branches that rub together. You can see here in this picture, there's a lot of branches rubbing together. Remove big branches. The 3-cut rule, the first cut on this big limb, if you need to remove it, This first cut is so important because typically what I see sometimes is people start to remove this limb, it breaks off, and then it peels this whole layer outside skin, if you want to call it. And this opens up a big wound in the tree. So this first cut, and this is once again, this is if you do have to remove big limbs or branches, this 3-cut rule is always a really important thing to follow. I mean, this has been um, very stressed since I've been in landscaping, just on removing these. So the first cut, you go up about a third. The second cut is the removal cut to get rid of that branch. And now you're going to be left with a nice little stump there. And then you got this third cut just to remove that stump. But it's important to never go into what's called this branch collar. You want to leave that little stub out there. It'll naturally heal itself and it'll be fine. And of course, are we going to be pruning to remove these guys? When it comes to pests, you know, first thing is try to practice eco-friendly methods on removing pests. For me, I like to use a soap, water, and a little bit of oil solution, cooking oil, like a little horticultural soap, just to try to spray them off, get rid of the pests. And how much pest damage is too much? How much can I take? If I have to remove some branches for pests, once again, just be sanitary and try to get them out. Pinching, if you never heard of pinching or tipping, is just basically this is the a thing that we do to plants to encourage them to push out. We're removing that apical dominant part of the plant, that tip, and we're making the other lateral buds on the sides bush out, so we get some better, fuller plants sometimes. It's a really nice thing to do sometimes. Summer pruning. Well, this is something that, I've seen a lot done more in the fruit trees and so forth. It can be done. Um, I would say first do a little research on the plants you have and if they do require summer pruning, but just be careful. It's really about just trying to slow the growth, control the size. Um, yeah, like I said, just overall, you're just reducing that green of the plant, the photosynthesis, or try to slow it down somewhat. But it is beneficial for fruiting trees and for size. So it's one of those things where I'm not going to touch too much upon it, but it can be done. Just be careful. Ooh, pruning do's and don'ts. Now, so these are just boxwoods, very commonly found out in the landscape now. Boxwoods want to get big. We use a lot of boxwoods for hedges and perimeter areas. You can see a nice healthy boxwood, and this goes for any kind of plant that's been sheared throughout the years. Is over the years the constant shearing, you're going to get this to the left, underneath. We don't see it until we really start to get into it and prune hard, and then you start seeing all that bottom deadwood and so forth. So this is what's going on. When the more we shear, the more we do heavy pruning, we're speeding up the life cycle of that plant. Once again, it goes back to, plants have a purpose, right? If you're gonna have these formal hedges and so forth, sure, boxwoods make great plants. Myrtis also does. They make these plants are really great for doing that. But just really have this in the back of your mind that over the years, this is what's going to start to happen. And hopefully this has never happened to any of you, but how many times have you seen this? One thing with any kind of major pruning that needs to be done, consult a professional, get somebody out there to do an evaluation, somebody that's licensed and bonded, whether they're an arborist, so they can, once again, pruning is for safety. Nobody should have to deal with something that looks like this, right? And palm trees. Palm trees is one of my secret loves. I love palm trees. And you can see this picture here of this palm. And I drew this red line here to show, when it comes to palm trees, for any kind of pruning, you're supposed to create this horizontal line. And anything below this line is what you're supposed to prune. Anything above, you leave alone. And the more they prune this palm, and this is a very expensive, this looks like it's a date palm, Felix. But yeah, this is, yeah, Phoenix dactylifus, it looks like. So It just this palm could suffer in a while. And this is we're talking thousands of dollars for these types of palms. So be careful out there when you're pruning. Make sure you have somebody that knows what they're doing if you're going to be doing major work as far as pruning. Okay, like I said, climate appropriate plants. This is going to be a quick tidbit, but you know, the right plant for our climates. What are California friendly plants or what are drought tolerant plants? What are California native plants? Is there a difference? Well, California friendly or drought tolerant plants, that classification I usually put them in as far as exotic plants or exotic species from all around the world that'll do great in our Mediterranean climate. California native plants is just that. There are California. These are plants that are native to our state. Some of them are endemic only to California. Some of them go into different states, they're native to our southwestern region. They can go from Arizona or from into California, down into Baja, down up into Canada. So there's beautiful plants that our state has, that are well adaptive and suitable to our environment. All right, so yeah, here's a big thing, right? California is not a desert. I always hear that we're in a desert. We're in a desert. Well, we are in a we have a Mediterranean climate. We do have deserts in California. We have woodlands. We have, we have our chaparral areas, our coastal areas. We have a great climate that is suitable for so many different plants. But it's about finding that right plant for our property that'll do well. I really encourage you to look more into California native plants and the benefit. Not only will they make our homes look beautiful, but we're creating more habitat for our natural fauna. California friendly plants. Here we go. Plants from all around the world. They are moderate water users. They do need that summer water, easy to adapt. But our natives, once again, I mean, that's ceanothus to the right. What a benefit of having natives. Now we're to the end of the workshop, everybody. We might not have too much time for Q&A. We can go a little bit over for those of you who want to stay over, but the last part is just really about inspecting those sprinkler systems. Once again, I'm going to be answering everybody's questions they submitted through chat. So if you have very specific questions, please, please, please submit them in the chat feature, and I'll be getting to them and getting to everybody. Sprinkler systems is just one of those things this is the most important slide, I think, for this whole section is, we should go out there and inspect our sprinkler systems at least once or two times a month. Why? Because typically our sprinklers go off in the middle of the night when we're sleeping and we never see the issues that are going on out there. So when you're out there, take a pen and pencil, a pad, and make note of all those issues that are going out there and fix them as quick as possible, because the gallons of water that are wasted is just astronomical sometimes, right? Sprinkler fun or sprinkler waste. There we go. So something like this, just so much water is gushing out of there, and I've driven by places and I see this going on day by day by day. So it's just, is the pressure too high? Can we fix that? Pressure in our systems causes misting, and then that water is not placed out in the landscape appropriately. So they make what's called pressure regulating bodies. So it's a little bit of extra cost to you to put in a body that has pressure regulation, but the benefit is the water's going to go directly where you want it at the right pressure, and you're going to save water overall. Sprinklers are too low. Consider putting in a higher pop-up. Check if they're on a swing arm or on a different type of assembly. Now, I am going to be having a sprinkler workshop later, so I'm going to just go through these, but so we can really touch up on this. But this is really about the maintenance part of it. Missing nozzles or broken bodies, get them fixed, because you're talking, if a nozzle is missing that was putting out 2, 3, 4, 5 gallons every minute, now it's putting out 40 gallons every minute plus, by it just gushing out there. Not only is it gushing water here, but the performance of these sprinklers starts to decline because all the water's coming out of here, not pressurizing the line properly, and then you're going to have dry areas. And not only, look at all that waste. worn or cracked or broken sprinkler seals or bodies, they make pieces where you can fix them. But it does take a little care. So it's all about visually inspection, making notes, and repairing. Tilted sprinklers, we see them quite a bit. Are they clogged? Do we need to unclog them by putting in new screens? Are they spraying out into areas or that's not needed? Make sure you can use that little ratchet screw to tie them in. Now, this screw is just for very, very fine tuning. It's to take, let's say, if you have a 5-foot throw, it's to maybe reduce it by about a foot. Anything more than that, you start to reduce the performance of that sprinkler. If it's shooting in the wrong area or spraying into the wrong area, ratchet it back. Plain and simple. Now, one thing I see a lot out there is crack lines. So they do make these great devices, these great pieces called slip fixes, where you can go in there, and these basically they slip back and forth as far as they expand out, so you can make your cuts, glue them together, expand the line out without having to bend any pipes or anything. Great repair component. And then plant interference, when the we see this a lot when with the use of spray heads in shrub areas. So this is a good opportunity to think like, okay, if that water's just bouncing off my plants and going somewhere else, then consider replacing it, maybe converting to drip irrigation. It's always a good thing. Runoff, next month's workshop, My Garden, My Watershed, we're really going to talk, really stress the importance of keeping our water on our in our landscapes, on our properties, and reducing runoff, because that runoff, not only are we wasting water, but we're also, we can also, sometimes this stuff carries toxic materials into our storm drains and out to our ocean. So, it's really important to consider keeping that water on site and reducing overall runoff. Okay, everybody. So we are down to the stretch. These last slides are about maybe residential rebates that we have. So we do have the turf removal program. For information, go to our rightscapenow.com website or our IRWD.com website for information on all these programs. Make sure to read the terms and conditions, the do's and do nots. Apply first before doing any kind of removal of grass or repairs or retrofits. We do have a great spray to drip program as well, just great rebates that we have available for our customers. So go to our websites, hit the links on rebates, and really read the information. Here we go. Some great rebates, turf removal, smart timers, rotating nozzles. And then, of course, our RightScape Now on our IRWD.com website. And we do have our upcoming workshops. So if you go to our events page, you will find these workshops. Now, Joey has been feeding me some questions. Joey, you want to take yourself off of mute? Here we
Hey
are.
Juan, yeah, I have a couple of questions that we've been bringing in throughout the presentation. The first one I can give to you is a question, actually two questions about mulch.
Mhm.
Um, I've used colored mulch for a year now on all of my areas in my garden, and I have not seen any problems. Should I change to a non-colored mulch for the future?
Once again, that's more of a preference thing. I'm not going to tell you what to do. If you like the color mulch out for your landscape and it's providing you that aesthetic that you want, it's really up to you. I try not to use color mulch just because, I know it has, that coloring comes from a chemical. There might be other things there, but once again, that is my preference. So once again, that is completely up to you. I don't want to encourage you not to, especially if you like the way it looks like. It's just more about um, preference. If you are mulching around, let's say fruit trees or edibles, I would say yes. Get it out of there. But for your landscape, once again, it's just depending on what you want. I try to do environmentally friendly practices when it comes to landscaping by not using, synthetics and so forth. So it's really, once again, a preference.
Great. And another question about mulch. Is mulch the same thing as compost? And do we have to mix compost in with mulch to make
No,
it mulch?
no, mulch is shredded, hopefully bark or plant or trees and stuff like that. That's placed on top as a dressing, as a cover. Compost is broken down plant material. I mean, it's broken down. It almost has the consistency of coffee grounds, has a beautiful smell, and it's a conditioner to actually mix into the soil. So it is a soil conditioner. So yeah, mulch goes on top. Compost you can also spread on top as far as a nutrient factor, but once again, it's used more as a soil conditioner.
All right. And we have a couple questions about watering. So the first one
Yes.
is, uh, we're going into fall right now, but our temperatures are consistently in the 80-degree range. Should we still be cutting back our water usage for our plants?
Yes, if you did take a look at those slides of our weather station data, you can see there. I mean, we're talking about cool season grass that it's measuring, but you can see how in September the water or the water loss from the plant starts to reduce, and 30% is right about right. I mean, we're talking. Yes, it is warm, but the plants, the beautiful living organisms that start to shut themselves down. They know the sunlight's out there. The days are getting shorter, and they start to and also in the morning. It's a lot darker in the morning. So by the time they start to become active, when the sun comes out, it's later on in the day, and then the sun starts to go down earlier in the day. So plants do know this. They start to shut themselves down and require less water. So yes, start to cut back your watering. You know, uh, just like anything else, monitor, see how your landscape reacts, and if you have to give it a quick splash of water, go ahead. It's just I don't want to tell you go out there and completely do this, and then your landscape will go into shock. Because it's probably been used to getting that amount of water already. So, a little bit of goes a long way. Just go and reduce a minute or two, and then we really start to tailor back once the weather starts to get cooler and cooler.
Thanks, Juan.
Mhm.
And one more question about watering. Is it better to water every day for 5 minutes or to water every other day for 10 minutes?
Well, it goes back to that frequency. When if you tend to water every day, the soils are going to be saturated every day, which might not allow for a healthy soil. Not enough oxygen. The critters might not be lively in there. So it's about watering deeply but infrequently. So it's good to space your watering. You know, and get that water deep, stretch out those root zones, and your landscape's going to look a lot better. So it is better to divide up, instead of every day. I think our recommended schedule right now is around 3 days for grass, 2 days for shrubbery areas, which is, it's very conservative, but it's a good starting point to consider.
Great. And
Okay.
then just have one more question here, Juan, about uh, fruiting trees. What's the best
Yes.
way to prune fruiting trees?
Oh, wow. I knew this was going to come up. Now, fruiting trees or edible gardens is a whole different science, you guys. Now, there's great, I would say, it all depends on what type of fruit you have. Is it a stone fruit? And stone fruit, anything with a pit, right? So is it a cherry tree? Is it a peach tree? Is it an apricot tree? I mean, there's just so many different trees out there when it comes to fruiting trees. Is it citrus? Are the avocados? I mean, every fruiting tree has its own specific requirements as far as pruning. Some fruit on last year's wood. So whatever came out this spring has to mature a year or two or three or four for them to start providing bear fruit. So, like I said, fruiting trees is a whole different science. I would really recommend you to contact our master gardeners. If you want to email me, you can always email me at, here we go, askjuan at irwd.com. I will make sure to forward your email. If I can't answer it, forward it over to my great colleagues out there and friends that are in this beautiful green industry and get you an answer. But once again, you have the Master Gardeners website that have you can submit questions to, and YouTube. I mean, on YouTube there are so many videos. All you have to do is put in there pruning as your first keyword, and then you're going to start seeing a list comes up of, pruning fruit, pruning apple trees, pruning peach trees. I mean, it is a different science when it comes to fruit trees. So it does take a little bit of time to do a little research, educate yourself on the type of fruit trees you have or want to have, and then you're going to have to really uh, take responsibility on watering them properly, fertilizing them properly so they can produce, thinning them out properly so you can get a nice amount of fruit and also, a nice size of fruit. Okay. Well, thank you, Joey, so much. That was the last question here. But if there are more questions in the chat feature, these are some of the questions, of course, that I am going to be responding to and putting into the um, into the email when I get to everybody back. So, lastly, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Uh, if you have time, sign up for our workshops coming up. Here are some more numbers and some email addresses if you want to contact us if you have any special questions. But once again, if you have any kind of gardening questions, you can email me at askjuan@irwd.com, and I will get back to you um, in a reasonable time. And once again, I can't thank you enough for joining our workshop. Hope you enjoyed this, and this will be posted on our website for future reference. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful week, and be safe out there. Thank you.